Hello and welcome to today's session. This is our first webinar of the new year and we're wishing you a very happy new year from everyone at Vitality. And we couldn't be kicking off the year in better style. Today I am joined by the wonderful Dame Jessica Ennis-Hill, Vitality Ambassador and Olympic royalty. Obviously we all know Jess incredibly well for smashing it in the 2012 Olympic Games in London and then going on to compete once again after having her first child Reggie in 2014. She went on to become world champion and later taking silver at the Rio Olympics in 2016. So today Jess is a dame, she's a mum of two and she's founder of the Jennis app, which is a fitness app aimed at women focusing on hormone intelligence. So today Jess and I will be talking about pregnancy fitness, postnatal fitness, cycle mapping and hormones, and also perimenopause and that stage of life for women also. So I hope you enjoy today's session. Let's get started. So, Dame Jessica Ennis-Hill, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
We absolutely love working with you at Vitality, and I know our members absolutely love any event that you come and do with us because, I mean, obviously, you're such an inspiration to so many people. I think particularly all the women out there in terms of everything that you've achieved, but also you somehow managed to be, despite that, really, really relatable as well in the way that you speak about things. So we really appreciate you being here. And I thought I'd start by saying, I mean, thank you so much for joining us as well for our first event of 2023. Happy New Year.
Oh, Happy New Year.
But obviously 2022 for you was a big anniversary, wasn't it? So thinking back to 2012, the Olympic Games, that kind of absolutely epic, monumental, historic moment that I think none of us will ever forget, really. And I think we all remember exactly where we were on that Super Saturday. I know personally my son was just coming up to 1 at the time, and that summer was just glorious, wasn't it? And it must be such a special memory for you. I mean, I know you've had lots of achievements since then as well, but how was that sort of 10-year anniversary, kind of reflecting back on 2012?
It was honestly bizarre, so strange to think that 10 years have passed since that, iconic moment. Yeah, I mean, my memories of those 2 days are still very, very fresh in my mind. And like you say, everybody has, a story of where they were and how they, watched that evening of athletics unfold. And for me, I can remember, how the emotions, how I felt when I stepped out on the track for the first time for the hurdles and how I felt after the 800. And, it still feels very raw, but to actually say it was 10 years ago, it feels really bizarre. It was such an incredible time.
Amazing. Did you do anything to celebrate or mark the occasion? Were you kind of watching it back with the kids? I wonder, have they seen it?
They have seen it a few times, just when it's kind of popped up on things, and I think my husband made them watch a little bit on, some of the BBC coverage that we had recorded. But I mean, they think it's exciting, but they're not blown away by it. They're very cool,
mum,
and
yeah,
exactly.
To them,
yeah.
Mum,
so they they obviously just see me as mum, which is how I absolutely want it. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's just such an incredible time to be part of. I feel very fortunate that I was able to be in that phase of my career at the age I was when a home Olympics came around. And I remember the 2 days of competition feeling very nervous, very anxious, and almost just wanting to know how it was going to unfold. I kept saying to my husband that, I wish we had a ball, just to kind of predict the future, what's going to happen? Is it going to unfold the way I hoped, or is it all going to kind of go a different way? And thankfully, it all went the right way, and my friends, my family were there, and there was lots of celebrating to be had after.
Yeah, I've heard you say before, actually, everything aligned, didn't it? As you say, I mean, it must have been so nerve-wracking, obviously, going into that. The pressure must have been intense, and nothing like it. But everything really did go perfect. Like you say, you were the perfect stage of your career, perfect age. Even things like the sun was shining. It was just all perfect, wasn't it, really?
Yeah, and I said to, my friends and family after, I felt very lucky, really lucky to be, in that phase of my career at that time. And so many people have said, it's not luck, you trained. And I obviously trained incredibly hard, but you know, sport needs so many different things to come together at the right time. It has to all like align. You have to be injury free. You have to have the conditions to allow you to perform the way you need to perform. And thankfully for me on those 2 days, that all came together for those 7 events.
Amazing, amazing. Well, a huge sort of topic that we wanted to talk to you about today was the topic of women's health, which I know is something that you feel really, really passionate about, women's fitness. And I'd love to talk to you about actually there's kind of the 2 motherhood experiences that you've had and how those, how your career kind of played into that. Because obviously after you had your son Reggie, you decided you'd go back into competing, which is obviously quite a big decision and quite a challenge, I imagine. So how did that, you know, because you competed in the World Championships, was he about 13 months old, I think?
The following year.
Yeah, amazing. So how was it going back into that? Because most mums, I mean, I know when I had my son, my first son, I mean, oh my goodness, I think I just spent most of the time sitting on the sofa watching box sets. So it's incredibly impressive. But how was that journey? Because that must have been challenging.
It was definitely challenging. It was, just something that I had no idea what it was going to be like most new mums. You know, you can hear stories from friends and family and they can try and explain to you how you'll feel when you have your first child and what it'll be like. But actually until you go through that whole process of being pregnant postnatally, you know, meeting your child for the first time and then all those changes that happen, like physically and mentally, you just don't know how you're going to feel. And I think in my head, I had this idea that I would have my son and, you know, bring him to the track and we just start, you know, getting back into training. He can be a part of this whole journey. And actually the reality of it is very, very different. You know, you feel like a completely different person physically. My body had changed completely. And mentally, you know, as an athlete, it wasn't just about me and my performance and me getting towards my goals. It shifted completely and it was all about Reggie and, you know, how I can be there to support him in every way and be the best mum that I could be. And it was a really challenging time because I had this kind of drive to kind of push on and want to still compete at the top level. But I wanted my son to be part of that whole experience as well. I was so lucky to have an incredible team and support network around me, and without those people, it would have been incredibly hard to have come back the following year to, you know, taken that world title again and do another Olympics.
Yeah, I think it's all about that support network, isn't it? Because as you speak, I mean, obviously for you and everyone kind of watching, like I say, it's somehow relatable, because I think even though we're talking sort of elite sport here, lots of mums go through that feeling of, you know, particular, I think, well, any stage that you have your children, you know, you often have a career that you want to maintain and you want to get back into, and perhaps there's, you know, a lot of women take on promotions and that kind of thing when they're on maternity leave and go back into a sort of higher level in their career after they've had a child. And like you say, it's a difficult transition because there's a sort of a change of identity as well. And like you say, you just don't know how you're going to feel. But do you think the support network is the most important thing for everyone, or how else do you think you can kind of support yourself through that period?
I think you have to acknowledge that you are going to be a completely different person. I think you have to almost, and I had to learn not to keep comparing myself to the person that I was before I had Reggie, and physically, you know, what I could achieve and how I felt from a mental perspective as well. I was a new person. You're a mum and, you know, you change it every way in the most amazing way. And I think it's that ability to know that, you know, life has changed for the better. You can still go back to your career and whatever you want to achieve, but do it in a way that's realistic and that's right for you. Don't be hard on yourself. It's a process of getting back to where you need to, and you will. And everybody does it in a slightly different way. But I would say that having that network of people around you, a supportive family and friends who understand and are there to kind of help and guide you makes a massive, massive difference. Yeah,
absolutely. It takes a village, doesn't it? They often say that with children. And I think, you know, as the world changes, we're kind of moving slightly further away from that. But that's what mums and dads really need, isn't it? Is that support network around to really kind of help them through it. Because so many of us maintain our careers through parenthood now, and it is a challenge.
It is a challenge, but I think it's the most incredible, rewarding time of your life, because, you know, as a sportswoman and, you know, a successful businesswoman or whatever area you're in, you're highly driven and motivated anyway, and then you have your children or your child, and that just takes you to that next level of motivation, because it's not just about what you're achieving, it's about what you're achieving for your children and for their future and what they see you doing. So I think, you know, mums are the most incredible people out there. I'm obviously biased, but I just think, you know, that level of drive and motivation is just so inspiring to see.
That must have been amazing for you, actually. I was going to say, Reggie must have been such an extra a level of motivation. I mean, clearly you're an incredibly determined and motivated individual anyway, but did you find that extra sort of something from being a mum, from having him, you know, being, obviously he must have been so young, you know, but still.
He gave me a whole new sense of motivation. I think I almost found it a bit challenging after the Olympics, because I'd reached this like huge pinnacle. You know, all I ever wanted to do as a young athlete was, you know, become an Olympian and get on the top of the podium. And then I had this opportunity where I had a home Olympics. I was, you know, the face of the Olympics, and I won a gold medal, and I kind of ticked all those boxes. And then after, I was like, okay, well, like, what's next? And how do you find that motivation? And then when Reggie came along, he just gave me the next level of motivation. You know, he inspired me in so many ways, because I wanted him to be part of what I was going on to achieve, and for him to see his mum achieve something incredible. And yeah, you know, everything I did was, yeah, all geared around him. And I look back at those years now, those final 2 years of my career, and I feel so honoured and so proud that I was able to kind of end in that way, and for him to be a part of all of that.
Yeah. How amazing. Yeah, and so then you entered the next stage, I guess, of your life, really, which was retirement. And then you had your daughter. So I'm really interested to know, kind of, I guess, first of all, how your personal relationship with exercise and fitness changed when it sort of stopped being a job, I guess.
Yeah,
well, I suppose it's still a job for you, isn't it? But you know what I mean, in terms of, so you stopped competing. How has your relationship changed with exercise since then?
It's definitely changed completely. I think when I was competing, there was all this structure, routine, which I thrived on and I loved. And, you know, I had to be ready for this point, and everything was like counting down the days to big championships, and every session counted. Whereas when I retired, that kind of all went out the window, and it was actually quite nice, just that release of, I've got no deadlines, you know, I don't need to be ready. It doesn't matter if I pick up a little bit of an injury. It's not the worry and the stress of what is the knock-on effect of that injury. And yeah, I think now I love exercise. You know, I'll always run, I'll always keep fit, but I do it in a slightly different way now. I do it for just the kind of enjoyment that it gives me, just the kind of physical benefits, but also like mentally, just that kind of space to run and switch off, and also to help my kids see, you know, a future within sport and exercise as well. Yeah. So that kind of motivates me. But yeah, I love exercising now in a slightly different way.
Amazing. And did you ever, though, at any point after having your daughter, did you kind of give yourself permission to just relax as well? Do you know what I mean? Because it is tiring, isn't it? And or did you get straight back into fitness again after you had her?
No, I learned so much after having Reggie. So, you know, having a great physio and medical team and everyone around me who really guided me and told me what was the right thing to do and the right process to follow after having Reggie. So I didn't go back into running straight away. I started with the basics and I built up gradually, and then got back to, you know, all the events that I needed to do. So once I had Liv, I was very much, you know, wanting to kind of tap back into the way I did it with Reggie, because I knew it worked and it's a sensible way to get back to fitness. So I absolutely didn't rush into training straight away. I didn't start running straight away. I just allowed my body to just settle and rest from, you know, the trauma of labour and everything that happens in those, you know, few weeks after. And then I just started that process again of just, you know, building back into exercise and doing it in a really kind of thoughtful, patient way. And I think that's really important for any new mum to know, that you don't feel pressured to get back to where you were straight away, because it's, you know, you're pregnant for 9 months and your body changes, and it takes a good year for your body to settle down again. So be kind to yourself and don't rush into, trying to do too much too soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of mums struggle with that because there is sort of that pressure, isn't there, to do that. But you're totally right. It does take a year for things, if not a little bit longer, for things to settle. And then how about the sort of mental health side of it, or even just sort of mentally, kind of I think a thing that a lot of mums struggle with is identity.
Yeah.
And we sort of started to talk about it a little bit earlier anyway. But for you, how did you find that a second time around, having your second? It's different anyway, isn't it? It kind of feels, it's not as scary as the first time, and you feel like, I've done this, did you feel that? But like, how did you deal with the kind of identity of like, who am I now,
Yeah, I think a lot of mums do struggle with that. It's the kind of the identity thing and then the guilt thing. I think that's just two big areas where it affects you, and it kind of comes at you when you're not expecting it. And I think, after having Liv, my second child, I definitely, I knew what it was all about, and I kind of felt prepared, but then at the same time was like, wow, 2 kids is like really crazy. And it made me think, when I just had one child, it was just so easy. But I think the identity thing is a big thing. And I think you just have to make sure that you are like good to yourself. Like, you have to allow time to breathe for you as a mum as well. You're there all the time, sorting everything out with the kids and making sure that they have everything they need, but you have to actually stop and say, do you know what, I need like half an hour here or half a day here, just to kind of step back and gain perspective and give yourself time, because otherwise you can get completely lost in who you are, really.
Yeah, I think that was another thing I wanted to talk to you about, actually, is that sort of, again, I think it's a common thing. I personally have gone through it as a mum, and I know friends who have too, and I'm sure many of our members, that feeling of being time poor, you know, and particularly when it comes to self-care, whether that's exercise or taking time for yourself, from a mental health point of view as well, it's very easy, isn't it, to blame it on lack of time, and we are time poor. That's definitely true, but I do think sometimes we often, perhaps it's not necessarily, we might have time, we might have half an hour here or there, but it's that guilt of spending that time on yourself. I think a lot of people struggle with that.
I think that's the thing that makes it really hard. I think, myself and so many other friends, you feel that you need to go out on a run or, do some exercise or do something for you, but you're just so consumed with the guilt of, oh no, I can't because I need to sort this out for the kids, or I need to be here. And you kind of wrap yourself in that guilt, when actually if you step back and you think, I'm going to go and have half an hour run here, it's going to clear my mind, I'm going to feel amazing for doing it for myself, and you come back energized in a strange way that you can give your kids like a different level of energy. So I think it's really important to make sure that you aren't too hard on yourself, and unravel some of that guilt if you can, and make sure you do give yourself a little bit of time, because it has a positive effect on the kids in the long term.
Completely. Prioritising yourself, actually you're prioritising them ultimately, aren't you? Because you're giving them the best version of yourself. Exactly. It's great to hear that you struggle with that too. I think a lot of people will be comforted by that for sure. So then, you started Jennis, you founded Jennis, the women's fitness app. Was that in 2019, am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that started out as a sort of pregnancy and postnatal app for women, didn't it? So what was the motivation for you behind starting that?
Yeah, all drawn from my experiences with having Reggie, towards the end of my career. And, I felt so fortunate that I was kind of surrounded by great people and experts and physios and physiologists who all helped me understand how my body was changing. And then I was able to take those learnings into, like I said, when I had Liv. So I had all this knowledge and like access to great people. And it actually made me think a lot of women don't have this support and don't know some of the basics, things that they should be doing, like through pregnancy and postnatally. And that, enabled us to create Jennis, which was super exciting. And since then, we've kind of broadened what we offer our women. So that whole understanding around, us as women, our physiology, how our hormones work, and actually if we tap into them and understand, those fluctuations and variations on a monthly or, going into those life stages, we can actually, move in a more positive way and, get a grip on how we are as women. So it's been a really exciting couple of years, just really kind of delving into that whole side of women's health and that support.
It's really inspiring because I think cycle mapping, that's sort of the basis of it, isn't it? In terms of like tracking your cycle and understanding your cycle, and then learning when it's best to do certain types of exercise to maximise your potential, right?
Yeah, and within elite sport, you know, we're only kind of just touching on that kind of understanding of women's cycles and hormones. So within the app, we're very much targeting, you know, everyday women to help them understand that we do have these 4 phases of our cycle. We can train and do more strength in our follicular phase, or, you know, more steady state in our luteal phase. But it's just that kind of understanding of how we can harness our hormones and get the most out of the way we move as women, and not feel that we have to kind of fit into this standard, you know, bog standard way of exercising.
It feels quite liberating, I think, as a woman, because I think, you know, we are so different to men in terms of hormonally, aren't we? They're very constant, and we're going through these constant cycles, which change very much from puberty right through to then perimenopause and post-menopause. And it's really helpful to understand that, and kind of, you know, everything sort of starts to make sense, doesn't it, really?
And I think that so often it's kind of just skirted past, like we almost just think, oh, you know, it's our hormones, or we feel a certain way, or energy levels are up and down, but you kind of, as women, sometimes you're just conditioned to accept those changes and just kind of get on, where actually, you know, understanding them, tracking them, and having life interventions like, you know, the way you exercise, the way you eat, breath work, yoga, all these different elements can have a massive positive effect on, you know, how you experience your hormones through these phases. And that's everything we're trying to create and provide women within our app, which has been hugely inspiring.
You say interesting to hear that in terms of performance within athletics, that we're sort of not, you know, just scratching the surface at the moment in terms of research. But is this something that you were very aware of when you were competing, or is it something that you wish you'd had more kind of knowledge on?
Definitely wish I had more knowledge on. It wasn't anything we ever really focused on, and I think it is being touched on more now, but it's the lack of research. You know, there's not enough time, money and investment in women's health in this specific area to help us understand, you know, how our bodies differ and how we change. And I think a lot of that has to do with, you know, us as women, we're complex, and it, you know, it's hard to study these changes, but more research does need to be done, because, you know, it can help at that elite level, but it also helps at, you know, that everyday level as well, to just feel good and to know what your body's doing at different times.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the next sort of phase, I guess, because we go through cycle mapping, and then obviously the next phase that we enter as women, often in our 30s, but going into our 40s, is that perimenopause stage, where it can last quite a long time, can't it?
Yeah.
But that's something that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because that's when our hormones go crazy again, basically, don't they? Much like with puberty, but in a slightly different way.
Yeah, the physiologist that we work with, Dr. Emma Ross, she describes it as, you know, you enter puberty and your hormones are going up and down, but they're peaking, and then they kind of level off to a certain extent. Perimenopause is those hormone levels dropping, but they're dropping erratically. And then, you know, women experience all these awful side effects, and it has a massive knock-on effect to them, how they feel physically, but mentally it has a huge effect as well. I think that ability to understand your hormones at an earlier stage, to be able to track them and know what's going on, then you actually enter that phase in a really confident, kind of knowledge-fueled way, and you know how to tackle those symptoms, which is really important, because a lot of women actually don't know that they're entering into these phases, and it can be, you know, extremely overwhelming.
Yeah, you can start to think, what's wrong with me? Why am I struggling to sleep? Why am I suddenly feeling?
And there's so many different life interventions that can actually have a really positive effect. So again, how you move, how you exercise, how you fuel your body, you know, tracking your sleep, understanding certain types of breath work that can help. So I think the more we can communicate these amazing lifestyle interventions that you can start tapping into once you know a pattern of your hormones, then that's hugely empowering for so many women.
Yeah, hugely. And I think, I suppose it's, again, that liberation of being able to understand, have that knowledge, so that hopefully then what can be seen as a really quite negative stage of life, I guess, can be an opportunity to focus on your health, you know?
Yeah, and I think more than anything, it's just being prepared. Just, you know, our hormones are that common thread throughout all our life phases as women, puberty, you know, into your fertile years, whether you decide to have children, pregnancy, postnatal, perimenopause, menopause, that they're the consistent. So if we can understand them as individuals and tap into them, yeah, it's just that empowering knowledge that can really help you kind of navigate your way through them in a really positive way.
Absolutely. I know that menopause is a very popular topic for our members. We've done quite a few different events on that. And actually also for anyone watching, we did back in October last year, we did a session on cycle mapping. Vitality coach Jamie led that session with a lot of more detail into the 4 phases of women's cycles and how different types of training to do in those phases. So we'll pop a link to that in the handout section of this, and if you're watching on YouTube, we'll pop it in the description below, so you can go and do a bit more research if you're interested in more information on that. But it's really good, I think, particularly with menopause, perimenopause and postmenopause, that it's really coming into focus now, isn't it, as a topic? And I think there's a great deal more information out there for women than there ever has been before, and hopefully we'll get pushed further with that. Do you think? Because
yeah, definitely. I think it's just having the conversations, isn't it? It's just being able to speak openly about, you know, how different women go through these phases and make it, you know, relatable and help men to understand as well, so that, you know, we can help drive this conversation. I think it's really important.
Yeah, because men often are supporting women through that phase, aren't they? And it's really important that they have a full understanding as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So just jumping back to that sort of pregnancy phase again, what advice, I think, having myself gone through pregnancy a couple of times, it's quite daunting, I think, particularly the first time for women, to think, how is my body going to change? How am I going to maintain my fitness? How am I ever going to manage that whilst also raising a child? You know, it's quite daunting. Have you got any kind of tips or advice you could share with our audience in terms of that, if there's anybody out there that's worried about that?
Yeah, again, I think it's down to being kind to yourself and having patience. So not feeling that you have to go to, you know, exercising for an hour every day. Like, that's not realistic, and it's going to be very hard to achieve that when you've got a little person at home and everything else going on around you. For me, it was about finding those like tiny moments of time. So like when the kids are in the bath, or, you know, they're brushing their teeth, you know, just doing some lunges in the bathroom, or just having a TheraBand around my legs and doing some kind of glute activation exercises. Just small things like that actually contribute to helping you once you do start running, but also make you just feel more positive because you've done something. You can feel a muscle working again in the right way. So I definitely think having those small chunks of time where you just slip in a little bit of exercise and don't feel that you have to go away and do an hour session. There's 20-minute HIIT circuits that you can do that, you know, take very little time, but you can get your heart rate working, you know, really high and work yourself really hard in a short space of time and feel great after. So it's just kind of reprioritising how you exercise, I think.
Yeah, for sure. How do you fit things in now? How is your sort of exercise routine changed now that your children is it 8 and 5? Yeah. So you're at the sort of school phase, right?
Yeah.
So that brings new challenges, doesn't it? Because I think baby stage is tricky and very busy, and then you think you're going to have all this free time when they start school, and then you're thinking, actually, oh my gosh, there's quite a lot more there's a lot more of a mental load, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. So my daughter started school in September. I remember reading an Instagram post somewhere saying something about I'm quitting my full-time job so I can, you know, answer all the school emails, that kind of thing. So life does, you know, it changes massively, and although they're both at school, which is so bizarre that they're both there now, you know, you have all the after school stuff, and you have all the emails to keep on top of, and all the other things that are going on. So yeah, it's just trying to make it fit with how your life flows and changes. But I think having some kind of routine and plan and, you know, kind of structure to how you work out definitely helps.
Yeah. Have you started thinking ahead? I mean, this is pushing ahead for you, but I'm just thinking my son is 11 and he's just started secondary school, and that is a really big change.
I can't even talk about it. It scares me.
But it's really made me think, and actually preparing for this chat with you, and it really made me kind of reflect actually on that and the different phases that we do go through as mums that sort of coincide, I'm sure, with the changes that are going on hormonally for us as well. And it's such a challenge actually, But yeah, you're thinking ahead to that time, you know, how do you feel about that coming up?
It scares me. I can't even think about it. I'm just kind of getting over the fact that my youngest has started school, which is so bizarre, and I'm constantly thinking, oh, is she okay? Is she got friends? Is she just sat in the corner of the class with no one? Like all these worries. But the thought of senior school, I mean, that I just can't imagine it. It's I'm just hoping, yeah, it feels like a long way away, but I know it's creeping up on me, and it's just, again, it's like a process, isn't it? It's just following those steps, and hopefully when we get there it'll feel okay. Yeah. But I don't want them to grow up too much.
I know, it does go so fast, but yeah, let's not wish it away. Yeah, you've still got a while. Yeah. How about, are your kids into sport? Like, has that been a real consideration for you? I'm sure it has. And yeah, how do you kind of...
So obviously for me, I think sport can give you so much. It can give you so many opportunities and a platform to do lots of amazing things. And I think sport has given me so much, not just from an opportunity perspective, but also it's kind of created who I am as an individual and given me all those skills that I can then take into other areas of my life. So I would love the kids to go into sport in some way, not necessarily elite, but just to find some fulfillment in sport. But other than that, I just want them to enjoy exercising, and they see me and my husband exercising regularly, and you know, my daughter will kind of get out of the bath and then she'll be like, look at me, I'm doing some press-ups, and like start doing sit-ups and stuff. And I want that to be the norm, because I want them to just, enjoy exercising and sport. But, you know, you'd have no idea what they're going to achieve when they're older and what kind of area they're going to go into. So
yeah, and it's nice to let them naturally fall into that, I suppose, isn't it? And they, you know, their interests can change. And
I think keeping options open and helping them to, you know, try lots of different sports and have lots of different experiences, and then ultimately they'll decide what, you know, route they want to go down. But if you've given them the options, then hopefully it makes it a bit easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's next for you with I'm guessing it's Jennis and kind of growing that and sort of you know, going further with it. Where do you see it going in the future?
Yeah, it's really exciting. We've just been constantly building and evolving, and we've got this amazing platform in an app form where we have these great women that are using the app on a regular basis, and some amazing feedback, and we're constantly listening to them and, you know, trying to add more features to the app so that it services them in a great way. But yeah, we want to be able to support women through all these major life phases. So cycle mapping, focusing on the hormones in their cycle, but also into perimenopause and then back into pregnancy and postnatally as well, just to help women feel empowered and know their bodies in the best way possible to have these lifestyle interventions to help them feel great.
Yeah, I think going back to perimenopause again, I think it's and you and I, I'm sure, are heading into that, aren't we, at some point in the future? Oh my gosh, not to go there. But, you know, it's good to be aware of it, isn't it? Because it can start in your 30s, can't it? But again, like you say, self-awareness and being really, really in tune with your body and understanding it helps so much. But I think as we talk about these, like, life responsibilities and changes as well, I know that's something that we've spent a lot of time talking about when we visit perimenopause in previous sessions, is that it's your physiology changes, but also responsibilities in life can change. You know, perhaps if you do have children, they're getting older, and actually that changes things. Or perhaps you've got elderly relatives that you're caring for. You know, and actually I think looking ahead to that time, I wonder how you feel about that, going through that kind of stage. And you know,
I feel terrified, but at the same time, I feel that an amazing opportunity, because I've learned so much with what we do at Jennis, and I know that there's so many, you know, ways to kind of educate and help women understand those phases now. And I feel that as, you know, we move on in the years, we're only going to become more empowered through the knowledge and more research done in this area, which is great. And I think you're right, you know, that phase in your life, so much is happening. It's not just the physical changes and the side effects of your hormones, but it is life as a whole. You know, kids getting older and challenges of teenagers and the challenges of elderly parents and all these different things. It's a huge pressure cooker. So I think, the more prepared you are, the better. You know, it puts you in a great position. I feel that, yeah, hopefully with everything that I've learned over the past few years and the ability that we have to track our cycles and know, how we're changing as women, that I'll get there in a good position, hopefully.
Sure, absolutely. The other thing that I think would be really worth touching on today is the importance of strength training for women, which I'm sure is something that you feel particularly passionate about. But again, it's come up so much in recent events when we've been talking about women's health in general, actually, but particularly preparing ourselves for that perimenopause, menopause journey, because obviously bone density is such an issue, isn't it?
Yeah, I think strength training is a key part of going into that phase, and I think it can often be quite daunting for a lot of women to kind of delve into the kind of weights and strength area, and a lot of women have this perception that you just have to start bulking up or lifting really heavy weights, when actually that's not the case. It's just adding some resistance and some light weights to what you're doing to help with that bone density issues, and to build some strength. And again, understanding your cycle and knowing that your follicular phase is a great time to help build muscle, lean muscle, and do strength training, and just being aware of when to position that is really important. But yeah, I think variety to how you exercise is key. Don't stick to doing one form of exercise. Running's great, adding in some strength work, adding some yoga for flexibility, and I think covering all these areas puts you in a really strong position.
Yeah, that follicular phase for anyone watching that isn't sure, that is the phase. Could you just explain that? That's after your period, isn't it?
Yeah, straight after your period, where you're actually more likely to build lean muscle. So it's that time where you actually feel confident and you feel good, and you can go out for a longer run or push yourself a little bit harder in that phase, and have the positive results of that kind of pushing yourself to the edge a little bit. So yeah, and it's just knowing when you're there so you can maximize on it.
Yeah, so just to finish off then, I think it would be really nice, to stress how helpful cycle mapping can be, right? Because I do think that, again, thinking about preparing for this chat, I've been tracking my cycle for quite a long time, but I only started because I was trying to conceive. Yeah. And I think that's the point where most women start, isn't it? But actually, it's really important. It can be so helpful to do it at any stage, whether or not you want to conceive, or, to start doing it now if you're not already.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think most women, and I was the same, start looking into your hormones and understanding them when you're at that phase where you want to get pregnant and you're going into pregnancy. But actually, having a broader understanding of your hormones and how they change from a younger age, teenage years, puberty, is something that should be taught in more depth at that age, because it's something that's going to be with you for, the duration of your life. And if you can track and understand from that point, then as you enter these, phases as a woman, you're just prepared, and you have actual data there to show you, visually what your hormones look like, that you can take to practitioners, or you can take to your, personal trainer, or, how you're exercising at the gym, so you can get the most out of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think we tend to, don't we, just sort of accept as women, I did when I was younger, that I'm just all over the place. I feel like, I'm up and down, and rather than thinking, I know for me, going through trying to conceive and then pregnancy, I was so much more acutely aware of how I was feeling and different changes in my body, and tracking those, again, like you say, is so helpful.
Yeah, because I think, again, you just almost feel like conditioned that you just have to accept some of those changes and those kind of side effects and energy ups and downs and PMS symptoms, where you don't have to, because if you understand them, then there's actionable ways that you can make a change to how you go through those phases. And again, it just comes down to knowledge and understanding, and then having the tools to do it.
Yeah. So if you're not tracking your cycle already, start doing it. That's the message. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Jess. It's been an absolute honour and privilege and a pleasure chatting to you. It really has. And I'm sure everybody's really enjoyed watching you as well. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great chat.
Thank you. And I hope you've enjoyed the session. If you'd like to take a look at the other events that we have coming up this month, please do, in the handout section. They will be all detailed there. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please do have a look through our back catalogue with videos. Like I said, there's a couple that we'll link below that might be relevant. And thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you soon. Bye.